How did Ancient Enemies come about?
Originally, the role I was going to have was of the bad guy, the devil.
When you first got the script, you're like, what? A kid? Mustache? Glasses?
It was amazing to watch this character come out of nothing.
That is so cool.
Nimios, oi Nimios, Nimios, oi Nimios, won't you come and join us? Oh, great, a podcast! Shh, we're about to start.
All right, here we are with my first mayor that I've ever interviewed in a podcast, Mayor Bupkis, or as he's really known, Daniel Klein. He is an actor in H&MS, which are the videos where I grew up, and some videos that you grew up with, and he's in H&MS 11. Welcome, Daniel Klein. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. How about yourself?
Good, good. Thank God. So there's one question I wanted to start with. I hope it's not offensive or anything, but a lot of people do want to know, is Mayor Bupkis in real life Jewish?
You mean, am I?
Yeah, in real life.
Yes. I'm not from. I don't keep kosher, but yes, I'm Jewish. I was bar mitzvah. In fact, I was bar mitzvah with the head of the Lubavitch in Brooklyn. So it was
wow.
Quite a big deal and a minion.
How was that?
Scary. When I made mistakes, they corrected me from memory.
That's really funny. But
I still remember some of it.
That's great. But it must have been meaningful to do it in like Crown Heights, in the heart of like Jewish life and thriving.
Yeah. My grandfather, my father, my uncle, and enough others to make a minion were there.
So I guess let's start from your background. How was your childhood like? Where you originally come from?
So originally I was born in Washington, D.C. I grew up in New York City, primarily in the Bronx, but also in New Rochelle. I moved to Pittsburgh in 1973 for college and never left.
Oh, wow. What made Pittsburgh like the place for you to stay?
Well, I started with Carnegie Mellon University, and I hate to move. So I've lived in the same house for 44 years.
Wow. And is
also,
this the university?
Pittsburgh has nothing seriously wrong with it. I have the opportunity to move to California. I don't need that. I escaped from New York. It's a nice place to live.
Very nice. So the university you went to, is that the University of Pittsburgh?
No, I went to Carnegie Mellon University.
Oh, okay. So is that in Pittsburgh or in the area?
It's in Pittsburgh. It's a mile from the University of Pittsburgh. So my house is a mile to Carnegie Mellon, 2 miles to the University of Pittsburgh, about a mile to Chatham University, 2 miles to Carlow College. It's basically in the center of a lot of universities.
So are you primarily in acting, or is that something you just did on the side? What's the background of that?
I'm a computer scientist and an educator, and acting is for fun.
Oh, nice.
So having watched Label's interview, I'm one of the volunteers, not one of the professionals.
Yeah. Label's a great guy to work with.
He really is.
From the stories I hear. It's just like crazy, like behind the scenes of the interview, there's a lot of things I couldn't necessarily keep or just for timing and stuff, but like it's crazy. His background is like he was in school with like one of the biggest Hollywood people. Like I have to cut out like their names, but like really big Hollywood people. And it's crazy how he pivoted. But at the end of the day, it's kind of fun in that way, doing like independent projects. So probably from a computer scientist background, it's almost like the equivalent of working for a company or doing your own projects, kind of.
Yeah, I did professional comedic improv for 6 years. I was a member of a troupe called Theater Sports. I also do presentations on stage worldwide. I'm a lecturer and a keynote speaker. And so being on stage is normal for me. And so being in front of the camera is just a natural extension of that. But since you mentioned Label and his professional career, I went to junior high school with a major Hollywood producer, and I've recently gotten in touch with him again. So Things come full circle.
Yeah, full circle. So tell me about a little bit about computer science. Now that you mention it, like what is it exactly that you are? What's the word for it? Like what is your main profession in, basically?
Well, computer science, but I'm a software
Right.
engineer,
Yeah.
so that means I develop software. I work for Google right now, and so
Oh,
I
nice.
develop software in artificial intelligence and research. I've been a site
Oh,
reliability
wow.
engineer. I've been a software engineer. I've been a product manager. So I do a wide variety of things. I give talks. I give professional speaker coaching. I tell people how to get on stage and be persuasive and believable and charismatic. So I do a wide variety of things, which is why acting is just a natural extension for the things that I do. I
Oh,
was once,
that's
once
it.
introduced as the token extrovert.
So, tell me a little bit about AI because, especially from a computer science standpoint, I'm actually curious what your take on it is. I'm saying, did you always work on artificial intelligence or in that area when you're
No,
when?
no, if you want the technical details, I've been an instructor teaching languages. I've also been an instructor teaching kernel internals. I have a wide variety of expertise. I've been an expert witness in federal court. Uh, Artificial intelligence is a relatively new field for me. And the thing that I would tell you about AI is that it's not I,
Right, it's true.
right?
It's
So there's
true.
no intelligence. It is all artificial, but it is amazing what it can create.
Do you see it as a plus for the future, a pro con? Like, what's your take on it from a computer scientist standpoint?
From a computer science standpoint, as opposed to a social standpoint, it
Yeah,
is probably going to be a plus because it's a great assistant. From a social standpoint, there's tremendous potential for misuse, but
right.
there's also
It's
tremendous potential for positive use.
right. One crazy thing that I didn't even think about, and it just shows like the scope of AI, is that I was listening to someone saying there's a lot of discussion on like right now there's a lot of changes in the government and stuff, but besides the politics, but the one thing that they want to try to look into is AI for the government, kind of. And one of the things that someone brought up is that if you take AI, it could potentially hasten the cure for cancer, for example. And what
Oh,
that means
definitely.
is that yeah, because like what he was saying, like from one standpoint, is that one of the things that has to do with science in finding cures or finding solutions is you test different parts of everything. So let's say for a disease, you take different strains of diseases, different strains of medicines, and different that, and you calibrate it and you see how it goes, from what I understand. And so if you take AI and the AI will um, calibrate all your scenarios quicker than it would take for two scientists in a lab to. So basically,
Yep.
and it's such an interesting thing about to think about.
Well, the head of Google DeepMind won the Nobel Prize for the protein folding algorithms that he developed, and that's AI, figuring out what proteins will bind with other proteins.
Right. That's interesting. Um, okay, so let's get into a little bit of like the improv and the acting. Is that something that you find natural from your childhood, or is that something that came along as you went in life?
When I did improv, I invited a number of colleagues from work to see the show. And what they thought is I got on stage and I put on a mask. My mom came to see the show and she realized the truth. When I got on stage, I took off my mask. And that was the real person that you saw. So I've always had a very rich and fertile fantasy life in my head, and imagining things and improvising on things just comes naturally. So I got to be a kid on stage. And a
Yeah.
lot of what I did in Agent Emis was similar to that. I would take the script, which is the words I'm supposed to say, and I brought the character to life by imagining what would Bupkis be like? What would the clown of a mayor be like?
Right. And for sometimes it's really funny to see like obviously if you put kids in front of a camera, not always will you get the best result in acting, but their imagination is crazy upper level. And I think just the difference is that why we it's kind of interesting that like kids when their imagination is it's just on a spiral and adults it takes a lot of thinking and process, but my main point is that like it's interesting how kids could um, be better actors than adults can, but adults know better when it comes to actors. So it's kind of like an interesting comparison.
It's an interesting comparison. And when I teach people improv, one of the things I do is I say, I'm going to give you a subject. I want you to talk about it. And they'll think about what they're going to say. And what I tell them is, no, stop thinking. Just talk. Your brain will catch up with your mouth. And
Right.
what kids do is they don't put their brain in the way of their mouth and their actions. They just be the thing that they imagine. Adults filter themselves. And one of the joys of improv is, yeah, there are still filters, but it's not the adult filters. It's how far do I want to go with things? You don't say, I can't do that because somebody might laugh. That's the whole idea. You want them to laugh.
Right. It's interesting that that it's also in the aspect of the audience. The audience, like more than ever, we know that the audience and people, regular people that watch these things, like entertainment, comedy, and movies or whatever, are not oblivious. They are not. They're not numb to it. It kind of used to be, but that was because people were more into entertainment. But now people are really diving into these things, and so if you show any overthinking or any hesitation, it's caught on and it's jarring for some people. So it's interesting that you bring that up.
And the fun thing about improv is if I'm acting in a role, I have to ignore the camera. I have to talk to whatever character there is. And the camera is not there. But in improv, I can look right at the camera and acknowledge the audience.
Exactly. That is interesting. Do you prefer the audience or in camera for yourself?
You mean, do I prefer live theater versus?
Yeah, live versus recording. Yeah.
If it is a play, which I'm going to do a dozen times, I'd rather not. Because once I get to the point where I know it, okay, it's done. Film is you create the scene and then you create the next scene and you create the next scene. And I like the progression of things. So I would much rather do a movie than a theatrical production. But improv is fresh every single time. So if I'm on stage doing improv, that's the same as doing a movie.
But you don't think that also has to do with plays if it's in front of an audience, that you find a different aspect that you could play on at the moment?
Different people enjoy that more than I do. So yes, there is the audience dynamic. And when you are on for a particular scene, it's like you have the audience in your hand and you can work with them and their energy feeds on you and so on. But personally, I don't like doing that every night. I would rather have a different scene every night.
That's interesting to think of, because then it kind of gives a realistic perspective for yourself, because in real life, that's not how you would actually do it. You wouldn't play a whole aspect of your life again and again and again. You're kind of moving on to the next part of your life, kind of like.
And to address your point about being engaged with the audience, when I used to teach classes, I would fly into a city, teach a class for 5 days, 8 hours a day, and then fly to the next city and teach another class. And it would be the same class 20 some odd times a year, 5 days a week. The same materials, but everybody would have different questions. And you learn to read the audience to see when they had questions. You'd see it in their face. So you could say, I see a question there. There's a lot of that interaction, but it's a script that I had. It wasn't a script, but the materials were something that I knew cold. So they could ask me any question at all and I'd have the answer for it. The theater, there's no question coming from the audience. It's just a performance. And I'm rather have the interaction.
It's really interesting to think about.
Because it's almost like it's almost like what finds you more of a difference is the difference of a wall, but you're in it at the moment, if it's in a play or in an improv, or and you're in a scenery, it's all around you, but there's the production aspect. So there's the camera, there's the director, there's cutting, there's lights. So it kind of takes, so it's like there's pros and cons to both, but it's interesting to think about.
And if I'm on stage, I like the ability to be able to, at a whim, break the fourth wall.
Yeah. And the audience connects to that too.
Yes. And for people who are watching the podcast and don't know what that is, when you're on stage, there's the wall behind you and the walls on the side, and there's an invisible wall in front of you. That's the fourth wall. But when you break the fourth wall, You acknowledge the audience. You go through that wall and say, I'm talking to you, or I'm answering your question, or I'm responding to your laugh. And I much prefer being able to break the fourth wall. And
Yeah.
watching films where they can break the fourth wall is also fun.
Okay, so let's get into a little bit on Pittsburgh a little bit. So, like, were you very involved with the Jewish frum community in town? Were you go walk? Were you part of it? Were you on the outside? Like, what was your interaction with Pittsburgh in general?
My home right now that I've lived in for 44 years is in the Eruv. But what I say about myself is I'm an observant Jew. I watch it go on around me all the time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm not practicing because I already know how to do it.
Right. So wait. So you're there for 44 years. So you kind of saw the progression of the frum community there.
Yeah.
That's interesting to think about, and especially it's interesting to hear it from someone that not necessarily it finds himself in that community, but it's interesting like to see from an outside perspective.
Yeah, it is interesting, and it is, to be honest, I have mixed emotions. But when I see
Understandably.
somebody, yeah, but when I wish somebody good Shabbos as they're walking by the house, there's always a response.
Yeah, it's true.
It's
It's true.
often surprise because there I
Yeah.
am in shorts, tending my garden, and I wish them a good Shabbos. It's like, oh, good Shabbos. So it's nice surprising people too.
Right. So I grew up as a Chabad shliach, so a Chabad emissary. My father's so my father and another person have like Chabad house in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, which
Mm.
you probably heard of. It's like a nice tourist a place, but um, it does feel like a community. Even it's different affiliations. So there's my parents that obviously are observant, but most of the community are not necessarily. But that's not the subject matter. That's not what defines it. What defines it is just you're Jewish. That's it. So let's sit down. That's all it is. And I think that's what it. I think sometimes a lot of people are kind of losing that aspect. But there's also pros and cons to everything. But at the end of the day, I do feel like you're Jewish. That's all that matters.
My mother's side of the family is Orthodox, and some of them live in Israel, some of them live in New Jersey. Historically, going back to the 14th century, it's been chief rabbi of Hamburg, chief rabbi of Lubeck, chief rabbi of Bavaria.
Wow.
On my father's side, my great grandfather was a rabbi, and going back from there. So I've got a rich history there. But my father's father, my grandfather, at the end of World War II became an atheist because how could God let this
Was he a
happen? There is
survivor?
no God. Sorry. He escaped from the Ukraine in 1920. My mom
Oh,
is escaped from Germany in 1936. And so in 1938, she had her citizenship stripped from her. But by German natural law, she got to get it back if she wanted, and for reasons of reparations and her descendants. So I'm also a German citizen again.
that's interesting. But Ukraine is not the best place at that time, like at that era, because
What wasn't
I
good
heard
then
stories.
isn't good now, was good in between sometimes.
Right. Yeah. Like I have a lot of friends that they have descendants that grew up in Ukraine in that time in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and
Stalin did not do well by the Ukraine.
yeah, it's true. It's true. So I guess let's get into a little bit about H&MS because at the end of the day, that's kind of what I'm interested in. But
Yep.
but I do love talking about your background in general. But how did H&MS come about?
I was going through Craigslist and looking at the auditions, and there was a call for actors, and I applied. And originally, the role I was going to have was of the bad guy, the devil. And Label
Joel
looked at,
P. Hammond.
sorry,
Joel P. Hammond.
yes, right, played by David St. Clair, or I think that's his name, David. Anyway, I auditioned for that role, and Label said, "Nah, you're not that. I got a better role for you." And it's like, I can do that. It's like, no, 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 no. And when I looked at Heyman's role, yes, the character who ultimately played him was a lot better than me at that. I got to play the buffoon, and I was quite comfortable being the clown.
Yeah. Did you know from the first place that it kind of was on the perspective of the Parm story?
When I read the script, yes.
Yeah.
But the casting call didn't say that, if I recall correctly.
Do you like that it's like in that aspect?
Oh yeah, it's great because retellings of stories, when they're not done in a hackneyed way, and Label did a wonderful job of retelling the story in a completely different viewpoint, was anytime you do that, it gives fresh life to the story. And he had
You
some
you pro-
wonderful turns of phrase in some of the things that he did, especially at the end, giving Haman a clump of earth.
yeah.
I really like.
um. So how was the filming? Because based on what I heard from Label from the interview, it is very independent and it's very much he had a very smooth process. So that would be meaning that it was probably pretty quick to film. So how long was that
It,
process of filming?
for me, I think it was 3 weekends, perhaps four. I don't remember. And then showing up for 10 minutes at the scene where the clump of dirt gets exchanged. So yeah, it all went rather smoothly. He scoped things out very nicely.
Uh,
Rehearsals were very brief, and then the acting was done well. The directing was with a light hand, and so I enjoyed the filming very much.
yeah, he also explained how he's very open to not necessarily compromise because that's not what ended up happening, but he was very open to influence from other people on set
Yes,
when it comes to the script and the acting and what ends up being on screen and what ends up being in the story. Um, I'm just wondering from your aspect of the actor, did you feel that?
absolutely. One of the things that I really appreciated about the filming is when you read the script, you try and give it life. And in the rehearsal, you give it the life that you see. The director then tells you what they want to change. And sometimes you'd think of something on the fly and say, I think this. It's like, yeah, give it a try. And so it wasn't the director's vision being brought to life, but rather the ensemble's vision of things being brought to life.
True. And sometimes, usually you end up getting that from independent films like Agent MS, as
Yeah,
opposed to if it's under a company or corporate, there's a boss and there's money and there's this. So so it's funny to hear like everything that's going on in outside world when it comes to corporate media, when it comes to this. And then you hear stories like Label telling you how he does his films and how very much it was like 5 guys on the back end and like 10 actors, and that's all we needed, kind of. And it's pretty interesting to hear
and
that.
and you can do things with a small group, but even the larger productions, there's still a give and take between the actors and the director. And the director ultimately is the boss. So if
Right.
the actor recognizes, okay, here's my idea, but you have the final say. And whenever I get on set, I always say, if I have an idea, I'm going to tell you. But when you tell me we're doing it this way, that's the way we're doing it. I've been on larger productions where there is a budget and there is a director. And at one point, they wanted to stretch the scene out. And the director said, here, I can come up with some lines. And I said, no, I'll just improv it. And they went,
Yeah.
okay, let's see what happens. And I did it. And it was one take and done because they liked what I gave them. But if it hadn't
Yeah.
worked out, I would have had to look at their lines and memorize them. So it varies completely. But in general, directors listen to the actors and the actors listen to the directors.
Did you have a lot of improv at H&MS?
Not in terms of lines, in terms of physicality.
Makes sense. I mean that's what I try to do, by the way. I directed like small things, like not really big things, but I directed a play for like kids, and I also directed like with my friends. We made like a short film, and one thing that I when I started writing it, I was like, okay, how am I gonna act it out? Like, what would I see? And then I realized the best thing to do is write it almost as bullet points, like enough to like tell the actor what to say, but not necessarily to demand much of what he's supposed to do with those lines. And it gives you it spares you a headache, and it also gives a lot of life to the actors putting a lot into it. Sometimes you'll meet actors that need more direction, but that I think comes clearer when you're on set as opposed to when you're writing it.
And the other thing is when the actors start to get to know each other, they reading their minds is the wrong exact term, but it's the basic idea.
Yeah.
You know how somebody is going to react to what you do, and so you can play off of each other. And that's a lot of fun.
But also in real life, so like you kind of have to do that because you're trying
Yeah.
to play a real character. The act you're not necessarily trying to overthink what the guy's gonna say or react to you, because because in real life that's not what will happen. You in real life you talk, he talks. So if you go about it that you're waiting for something to or waiting for a reaction, or if you're like kind of like in it should very much be that it's like between you at that moment, and then that person does his moment, but not too robotic, but in a way where it's like it gives you more freedom to what you're doing at the moment.
You have to anticipate your cues instead of waiting for them. Because
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, that's great.
if you're going to say you say ABC and then I say DEF, if I wait for my cue, DEF, it comes out feeling wooden. On the other hand, ABCDEF, I've anticipated my cue so that I come in not on top of you, but in a realistic way after you've done things. So when Hammond was talking to me in the office, and it's funny because it's been a dozen years since I did this, and I'm remembering all of these things. He'd whisper in
Yeah.
my ear, and it's like, "Oh yeah," and you just react because you know what's going to be happening, and so you make it as if it's real because it becomes real as you live it.
In terms of filmmaking, not in terms of socially or personality, what do you think Label brought to the table as a from director, as opposed to other productions where not necessarily are they associated with being observant in their own religion or whatever?
So what Label brought to things was flexibility, respect, and compromise is the wrong word, but it was necessary at times. We have to film this scene here, but there's something else going on, and so we've got to work around it. But it was flexibility and humanity. It was working with a person, working with a director. And so Label was very easy to work with because he wasn't directing. He was
Yeah.
advising, he was influencing, he was leaning. So I did a film where I had Label be one of the actors in it. It was called
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it was called Coming Clean. The MacGuffin is it was released in not 1969, but rather 2019, 50 years after the moon landing. The
Ah,
MacGuffin
okay.
is the moon landing was faked. Now I know there was really a moon.
Oh, okay.
I
Got
know
it.
there's a moon
Okay.
landing. We landed on the moon. But the MacGuffin is it was faked, and all the people who helped to fake it can finally come clean and tell their stories.
That's an interesting concept. That's
It was
really
a lot
deep.
of fun. And Label was one of the actors in that. And basically I just said, okay, here's who you are and here's what you're doing, go. And he just improv stuff. And it was wonderful.
Wow.
Yeah. All the actors
What
just improvised.
what did he act as?
He acted as the son of one of the people, and the basic concept,
That the one of the fake astronauts.
one of the people who faked the moon landing, and his dad had lied to him all of these years, and he's recovering, but he still feels bitter about it. And it was amazing to watch this character come out of nothing and appear in front of my eyes.
That is so cool. That really sounds like a great film. Did you finish? Did it come out, or what's
It
the
is
status of
out.
it?
It's on YouTube. So if you go to coming-clean.com, it's there.
Okay, I gotta look at that. That's not. The premise sounds really cool. And did you go like deep into the physiology of like what actors are thinking of in that scenario, or was it simply a playing out the scenario?
It was so basically we would tell Label kind of invented his own character. I tried to give him some ideas, but he said, "No, I got this," and okay, I trust you. But for example, my next door neighbor who lived 2 doors down from me, I said, you were the government attache who helped manage communications. And you talked with these people and gave her a couple of ideas, and I said, go. And so we turned on the camera, and that's basically what happened for everybody. We said, here's who you were, and basically what you did. And then they improvised on the spot from that. And it was just astounding. And what we all came up with at the end of it was the moon landing had to have been real because faking it would have been harder.
Yeah, sure, sure. Um, so back to what we're saying about Agent Nevis, but even though I want to deep dive that, but it sounds really interesting. How is it? Because I heard a lot of great things about Amy Gooderson.
Yes,
And she has officially like a school like acting, and she's also a foundation in the
she's a
film
real
community.
pro.
How was it like? Yeah, how was it like acting with her?
It was a delight because the easiest thing is just tell you it was a delight because whatever needed to be done happened. I
Yeah.
could be myself, she could be herself. There was the respect and the distance and the just mutual respect. And so whatever was asked by the director was easy to make.
Um, did you were what was your? There's a like a bit of a video of you in the premiere of Agent MS-11 of when you watched it, like you saying that you liked it. I could probably show you later, but yeah, Label like put some sort of vlog on the premiere, just like for the reaction. But overall, what did you think of the end result?
It was fun.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that my cousin, my mother's brother's kids and their kids all know me as Mayor Bupkis. So every now and again I'll get a call from a granddaughter saying, "Yes, I saw you in Agent Nemesis. It was so great." And I get these little WhatsApp messages from them.
That's great. Did you and you also did number 12 of Agent MS?
Yes.
Like Miguel Bus's re-election, which you didn't necessarily have a bigger role, but it was still like one of the best
It
parts of
was
that.
much more of a cameo.
Yeah, but I still loved it. Like
Yeah.
the joke of like you getting depressed over the polls and like, oh, what I'm gonna do? Oh, I'm gonna get a different paper, get a different poll. It's just like that was really funny. It was
And
perfect.
like I said, I that role was me as the clown. So because I was the clown, I didn't care if I was made a fool of. I didn't care if I
Right.
looked stupid or if I looked like an idiot. That was the role. I took the role of being an idiot very seriously, but took nothing on to me.
And that gives you freedom as an actor because as an actor
Yes,
you're trying to get to his if let's say David when he plays Joel P. Hammond he has to get to a standard to be the villain or a
right.
standard to be the whisperer, and Amy Gunnarsson has to be like the standard of like the hero of the story. Agent MS has to be like a standard of being the main role of the story, but you have the freedom of just doing whatever you want and it kind
Just
of
to be
gives
an
you a
idiot.
thrill of it.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
but not just
that scene where I go staggering down the hall and the camera's tracking me, the drug induced whatever it was, that was fun because it doesn't matter what I do. I can just stumble along and be an idiot.
yeah. Was it kind of annoying filming that scene because it's kind of like because it's a very cut edited sequence. So as an actor trying to film it, was it kind of difficult as for you or not really?
It was easy because I do it all as a continuous shot. Label does all the editing and trims it down.
Oh, not all the shots were different shots. Like he actually just did
Um,
this angle,
we
this angle,
did.
this angle, this angle.
I think we did 3 or 4 takes of the whole thing, and he was intercutting between them.
Wow,
But from my standpoint, it was easy.
that's interesting. Because as a creator, I'm watching that sequence. I'm thinking, okay, typical. You want to get a sequence, you want to do a lot of different things. But that's great to hear that it's like
Mm-hmm.
just like that. Um, did it surprise you how qualified Label was when he got into the production of how many jobs he took over?
No, no,
Really?
he was very comfortable with what he was doing and very professional, and so I'm not surprised that he did all those different things.
Yeah, I mean, writing, directing,
Yep.
producing, editing, visual effects, promotion, and whatever, just everything. It's really
The promotion is something I don't know how you do. So the coming clean that I was talking about, I did part of the script writing and part of the filming and all of the editing, and some of the website design, but real promotion, I don't have the chops to do that. But knowing that somebody could do all of the individual pieces is not surprising, but he did a very good job of it.
What do you think Mayor Bupkis in real life would be a successful mayor?
No. On the other hand, look at the current mayor of Pittsburgh, look at the current mayor of New York, look at the current political environment. A lot of it has nothing to do with qualification. It has to do with how you comport yourself and sell yourself. So 10 years ago, no way. Today, maybe.
That's so cool. How was it kind of interesting? Like, as a script, you're like, when you first got the script, you're like, what? A kid, mustache, glasses, hanging around in the mayor? Like, did it like at all like got you peaked?
I had heard about it a little bit, and it was a role. It didn't matter what it was.
Right, but I'm saying like, but regarding the story and when you first read it, did it like sound weird? Because like, if you tell Agent MS like what is it about to any like professional actor in Hollywood, they would just go like, this would never work.
But there are movies like that that do work. What I liked about it and what made me believe in it was the word emis. Right?
Yes.
You know, what is inscribed on the forehead of the golem? It's not vengeance, it's not justice, it's truth.
Yeah.
And that's what makes the golem such a great story, is that it's about the truth. So Agent Emis, love it.
All right. I think we're kind of running out of time, but I do want to catch up on the other things, and there's a lot of things to talk about. But thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It was a real pleasure to. I also like to thank you for being part of my childhood as someone that grew up with these videos. So I think I'm speaking for all who's watching to thank you so much for being a part of that.
I am happy to have done so. If it has brightened your day, then I'm glad.
Oh yeah.
But that's what a clown does, is they make a fool of themselves to make other people happy.
All right. Do you have anything coming out? Any projects that you might want people to be aware of? Some improv or something, maybe in your area in Pittsburgh?
Nothing right now, but I keep looking at auditions. I don't spend a lot of time looking for them because my real job keeps me very busy, but I love acting. It's a joy. It's a way of stepping outside of myself and stepping inside myself at the same time.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Daniel. And thank you so much. I would love to have you again to talk a lot about your background in the computer science and things and filmmaking and content, because that's what I love to do in this podcast, is talk about the creative things and what people really find themselves comfortable in with their career and with their job. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be in touch.
Okay. Yeah. Feel free to contact me. And if you do want to talk about AI, I'll find out what about my job I'm allowed to talk about, because there's some fascinating stuff.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much for joining us, Daniel.
All right. Thank you, Uziel. Bye-bye.
Yeah. See ya.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast. It was a great interview. I got more than I expected from Daniel. Like, I didn't expect his background at all to be as much full of life and careers, and it was amazing through and through. And it was amazing to hear from a unique perspective of an actor coming from a unique person, and it was an amazing interview, and I can't wait to have you back on the podcast, especially to talk about topics that we didn't even touch. Alright guys, thank you for watching. Every Thursday we have a new episode of the PNMS podcast with tons of different people from the Jewish entertainment industry, especially in the frum industry. So please join us every Thursday, like and subscribe, or follow on Spotify if you're listening from Spotify. And I hope you have a happy Pesach. I'll see you next time.